All right, we're in. Christian, hello.
Hello, good to be here.
Yes, okay. Another Socceroos squad um, announced this morning by Tony Popovich. A few interesting names. Let's start off with an absence, shall we? I feel like this is the one that kind of everyone wants to talk about. Alex Robertson. He, the quote is from Tony Popovich in this press conference that it is his decision to not make himself available. So I know you haven't had a time to watch the whole thing, so I'm going to do my best to transcribe these quotes for you. But basically, Tony put it down to the fact that it's on Alex's decision as to what he wants to do. He has actually made himself unavailable for the Socceroos squad. And now that's not clear whether that's to go and focus on his club career or where he's potentially eyeing up a different country to play for. But the curious case of why Alex Robertson is not playing for the Socceroos continues.
You'd probably have to assume that it's maybe another country allegiance that he's looking towards, because he's available for a couple of countries, isn't he? Or is it
Yeah.
just the one? It might be a
Well,
couple. So
England,
yeah,
and there may be one or two others, but yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. He might be exploring those couple of different options, but it sounds pretty strange not to put yourself available for the Socceroos, especially at a young age like that. It's like he's sort of mid to late 30s, and he's sort of close to announcing his retirement. He's still got his whole career ahead of him, and it's pretty weird just to, I guess, focus on your club football at the moment. I know he's come back from a couple of injuries, but it is very strange. And if that's the case, and then Popper said, "Okay, it's your decision," then you've got to trust and believe him, and just go from there. And it's a shame because he would have added so much value to this squad as well if he had put his hand up to say, "Okay, I am available for selection." But yeah, it is a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. Will's asked us for to read out the whole squad, so here you go, Will. All three keepers the same: Joe Gauci, Pulizo, Matt Ryan. Defenders, a fair few. Bayic, Boss, Burgess, Deganek is back, which is an interesting one. Jason Guerrier, Ryan Grant, and it's been a little while since we've seen him in a Socceroos shirt. Hayden Matthews receives his first call up from Sydney FC, the youngster. Lewis Miller, Kai Rouse, and Harry Suter. Then in the midfield, Max Ballard, Will you be happy about, gets his first Socceroos call up. So does Anthony Caceres. Then he's joined by Aiden Hrustic, Irvine, McGree, O'Neill, and Yazbek. And then the forwards, Brandon Barella was recalled with Boyle, Duke, Goodwin, Volupale, and Yengi. So a bit of a mix, a few interesting A-League surprises there, Christian. But before we get there, another player that we probably would have expected to be in the squad that isn't is Nestori Irankunda. The word on him is that Popovich wants to allow him to settle over in Bayern Munich, and the phrase was about allowing him to learn to be a young professional, which they expect over there. So he even said, in terms of his football, it didn't matter how well he played in the last window. This probably could have been still on the cards. So it's going to be weird without Nesta because we think of him as this prodigal young talent that should be in every Socceroos squad. But even if you look at the football that Popovich is asking his team to play, right, he's not particularly suited to the system that he's playing out.
And it goes to show as well, is Popovich leaning more towards the short term or the long term? Because if Iran Kunda is part of the long term plan, then I don't see why you leave him out, especially in these crucial World Cup qualifiers, and just get him in the squad every single time. I understand the adjustment in trying to acclimatise to Germany, a new club at Bayern Munich. He's playing in the seconds. Scored another goal in midweek during the Champions League youth group stages, which is great to see.
Yeah.
So obviously he's in some good form. So it is a bit puzzling to see, him get dropped again, because we had this discussion a few months ago about, the Ollie Roos, and he got left out of that, left out of those few fixtures. So yeah, it does seem to pop up quite a bit, this discussion about Aaron Kunda. And I just think we're at the stage now where you just got to pick him in every single squad. He is such a talented player. I know we go on about it, but he really is one of those players who can, open a game up. Even if you want to opt to start him on the bench and you bring him on, he's just one of those really useful weapons that you really need, especially like against a side like Saudi Arabia when it's going to be extremely tight. It is puzzling.
It's interesting. I mean, this is always the Australian dilemma, right? You have to travel so far to play for your national team. Graham Arnold had to deal with this a lot, specifically because of that under 23 Asian Cup. And it was like, well, is it actually worth it to pull young players out of their clubs if they're going to be playing football anyway, like Nesta will be doing for the reserves, right? So what's the long-term benefit for the squad? If he didn't have a great window last time out, then is it really worth pulling him away? There's a lot of tricky questions. I'm probably in the camp with you as well, that you pick him every time. He's just that good. I think you play him most times as well, but maybe not. Let's move on to some of the ins for this squad. Max Ballard, as we said, is probably the highlight. He's the one that's been building his case throughout the Eredivisie, Christian. He's played every single minute for NAC Breda since he's moved over there in the league, and getting lots of really nice reports. So he finally gets his reward for effort.
Yeah, he fully deserves it. I've just seen a couple of highlights here and there this season. Obviously, like you touched on, he's played every single minute of the league in the Dutch Eredivisie, performing extremely well. He just seems like just an absolute engine in that midfield. And, Popovic has obviously seen enough of him to warrant a call-up. And that's what you need to do at the end of the day. Just, perform at your peak and try and knock on the door for selection, because as we'll touch on shortly, there's a couple of others where we probably didn't assume would get a call-up a couple of months ago, and now we're here talking about these new faces in the squad, and that's what Popovic wants to do. He wants to, I guess, not rebrand the squad, because it is the usual core as such, but he still wants to integrate his own philosophy and try and bring in a couple of players that perhaps Graham Arnold maybe wouldn't have even considered in the first place. So yeah, that's what he wants to try and do.
Yeah, and he's definitely proving that if you're good enough in the A-League, then you're good enough to play for the Socceroos. So Ryan Grant is a name that, I don't think a lot of people were even considering in the frame for selection for this window. I do see the logic behind it, because, with this system, 3 at the back with your wing backs, we don't have a lot of cover at right wing back. And Keanu Bacchus was used in a placeholder in that position for Lewis Miller in the last window. Bacchus isn't in this squad at all. And he wasn't in the last 2 match day squads for Mansfield either, but that was the FA Trophy and the FA Cup. And I haven't been able to find any injury information on him, so I'm assuming this is just simply based on personnel and form and a football decision. But if you don't have Bacchus there, then Ryan Grant, I guess, is comfortable playing that aggressive right back position. So, look, I definitely wouldn't have picked him, but I see some semblance of a bit of logic there.
Yeah, when you look into it deeper, I guess it does make sense. From the eye, you say, oh, what's Ryan Grant doing in there? Like, what's he done to deserve a place there? Because I do think time is sort of passing by a bit. He has been a club legend at Sydney FC. He is the club captain at the moment, so he does possess that leadership. But when you're trying to analyze the Tony Popovic squad and his selections, you've got to really try and dig deep and understand why he's actually making those choices. And like Veluple, for example, no one expected that, but he just brings something different out in those wide areas. His form, obviously he's played under Popovic at Victory last season. So yeah, to most people it won't make sense, but Popovic, tactically understands why he's there, and we've just got to see how it plays out. It'd be fascinating if he starts, or does he come off the bench? We'll have to see.
Ryan Grant?
Yeah.
I hope not. It has to be Lewis Miller, right? You've had a pretty good window.
Yeah, he scored, I think, a week or two ago for Hibs as well, so he's in some good form as well.
We talked about Anthony Caceres on the podcast that released this morning as well, so we did a good 10 minutes or so on him, so go there if you want to hear that conversation. Brandon Borrello is back in. He has been the one shining light really for the Wanderers, in that game on the weekend where they lost to Adelaide. He was the one who was actually showing fight the whole way. He got his header really nicely. He scored a goal the week before, I think, as well. Really nice composed finish. So that was good. And then the other one from an A-League perspective is Hayden Matthews, young centre-back for Sydney FC. Given all the chatter around him, when I was watching the Champions League game last night that they played against San Frece, I was actually watching him quite specifically, and he's a really exciting talent. He's a very good ball player. He had this one moment late in the first half. He's literally just sitting on the ball in build-up, and all of a sudden he's played this splitting through ball straight through all the lines in behind, and I don't think anything came of it, but he just has those moments. So I think that's exciting for him. Another one that, probably not many people were looking at, but and we seem to have a pretty good, stock in terms of our centre defenders as well, but a young player that's probably going to be involved in the future at least.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at someone like Chikati, obviously he's done his ACL, so he's out for the whole season. So we are limited somewhat because Chikati was a starter towards the back end of Arnold's reign. Perhaps Popovic is trying to look for a few more alternative options before Chikati makes that comeback. And yeah, Matthews has been really impressive so far. What I've seen for Sydney is really, I guess, patient on the ball. You see some centre backs who like to, I guess, panic a bit, but no, he's calm and composed, and perhaps Popovich just wants, something a bit different back there.
Mm. Also, returning from injury, there's a couple of interesting ones here. Milos Degenek back in a Socceroos squad for since a long time. Martin Boyle as well. If we think about the traditional wingers and how he's asked to play, I don't really see how he fits into this team, but that's an interesting one. But then Cassini Yengi as well, who's been a starting striker under Graham Arnold for the last few camps, and now he's returned to fitness and he'll get a shot under Popper.
Yeah, Yengi obviously makes the most sense. Martin Boyle, I mean, am I happy about it? Yes and no. I mean, he has been there for a while, but I guess he's not dynamic enough for me. And I'd be really shocked, if we see a major part, major role with him in these next two internationals. So, yeah, Milos Degenek as well. There was some talk around him because of the Croatian connections, which is a bit silly. I didn't buy into that at all. But I guess, yeah, he's done enough. I think he's playing a Red Star at the moment, Red Star Belgrade still.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Degenek, yeah. So he's obviously still playing Champions League football. So he's playing at a top level. And yeah, Popovich has obviously gone for more experience in those wide areas defensively. And we know his attacking threat. I just think defensively, he can be a bit suspect at times.
All right, let's have a look at the goalkeepers. It's the same three from the last window: Joe Gauci, Matt Ryan, and Paul Izzo. Still, Paul Izzo is the only one of the three getting regular minutes over in Denmark. Matt Ryan still hasn't played at all, I believe, for AS Roma. And then Joe Gauci is getting some appearances in the Carabao Cup, which Aston Villa have now been eliminated from. So, look, Pelber was asked if Joe Gauci is his new outright number one. He said no. But then was very tight-lipped when asked anything about, was it game by game? It was like, no, Matt Ryan's the captain. He's still the captain. But Joe Gauci got both starts, and I know where you sit on this, that you think Joe Gauci should be the Socceroos number one.
I do, just purely based on just looking ahead to the future. And you can probably make the argument so far, you mentioned Paul Izzo is getting the most minutes out of those three. Against a team like Bahrain, for example, I wouldn't mind if Izzo gets some minutes, to be honest. But I do think moving forward, Gauci does deserve the number one spot at the moment. Obviously, Matt Ryan hasn't played a single minute this season for Roma, even though he should be, because Roma have been absolute disastrous form this season, sacked their coach after about 4 games in De Rossi, and yeah, they're looking pretty bleak at the moment. So yeah, surprising that he hasn't really had an opportunity yet, because the cup competitions in Italy commence in a month or so time. So maybe that's a chance for him to get some game time under his belt. But for now, yeah, personally, I'd go with Gauci to start.
How long does Gauci have to continually earn the starting spot until Popper has to pick a new captain? Like, as much as you can have leadership roles in the group, you want your captain to be part of the starting lineup.
And I don't even think it's that controversial if you choose Irvine to give the captaincy to. I mean, permanently full time. I think you look at someone like Irvine, he's just a natural leader in that squad, and no eyebrows would be raised there. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. It does make sense. If Ryan isn't getting any minutes, I mean, why is he still the captain? Of the team in general, the full-time captain. So yeah, probably a bit of a decision for Popper there to make if Ryan's sort of status continues with no minutes. But yeah, we can't doubt Ryan's leadership and his quality, but that doesn't mean that you need to have the captain's armband.
All right, some of the outs that have missed out from the last squad: Gianni Stensness, Massimo Luongo, and Connor Metcalf, all due to injury. Luongo has returned on the bench for Ipswich, but fitness is obviously still an issue. And then by selection, Thomas Dean, Keanu Bacchus, as we've mentioned, Daniel Arzani, Sam Silvera, and Apostolos Stamatolopoulos. None I think you consider probably particularly hard done by. Just a little bit of rotation, a new look for Popper to get some new players in and have a look at them. It's still very early, and I'm sure he's still trying to figure out where his best kind of 23 or 26 lie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Popper as well, getting those 4 points out of 6 in the last sort of international window against China and Japan I mean, that sort of gives him a bit of more breathing space and leeway to, I guess, try and see a couple of new faces and see where they fit into the squad, whereas they're not in a must-win position. I know Saudi Arabia is a massively important game. Don't get me wrong. At home, you'd think at least the point you need to get from that game to at least ensure top two or give yourself a fighting chance. But yeah, I think it's just Popovic's mindset that he wants to see as many players as possible. He said that in his press conference when he got announced as the Socceroos coach. So it's not a surprise in that aspect.
Yeah, no, not at all. In terms of the window, that's pretty much all the squad that we have to talk about. What are you expecting here, right? Because we're going into game 5 and 6 of the 10-game phase for World Cup qualification. So we're getting over the halfway point. And as you say, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are the other teams both on 5 points. So really, these are our direct rivals for that second spot. Japan look like they're kind of running away with first place, so we can let them have that. But it's the second one we're really targeting. We still have to play Saudi Arabia away, so they have a chance to take points back if they do go on to lose this game and the Socceroos win. But considering how close the race is for second, it makes these games really so important. And I know we say that every time, but it feels like they are really important every time.
They really are, because the last two games of the Socceroos' campaign is against Japan and Saudi Arabia. So I believe Japan's at home and Saudi is away from home. So you look at this Saudi game, and if you lose here, it really is an uphill battle for that top two spot. It really is. So I want to see, how Popovic goes about it. Does he go more offensively? Does he try and sit back a bit? Because again, obviously Roberto Mancini left his post at Saudi a couple of weeks ago, and Javier Rene is appointed now as a Saudi coach. So we know his time with the Saudi team during the World Cup beat Argentina. So we know all that history behind that. But it can be a bit difficult for Popovic just to, I guess, reanalyze the squad. It's going to obviously be different tactics, a different philosophy, different style of play, and how they approach the game. So, from that perspective, it might be a bit tricky for Popper from that perspective. But looking at it, I do expect at least 4 points from this sort of little window, these two games. Bahrain away from home is no easy feat as well. I know from memory we have struggled there recently away from home in Bahrain. It's been a couple of 1-0 results, 2-0, 1-1. So don't take it lightly. But I don't know about you, Lockyer. I expect at least 4 points from this next phase.
Yeah, that's probably around the right mark, right? Like, look, at home, it's Amy Park is going to be sold out, very hostile. Hopefully, you really would hope that the Socceroos can get a win there and then probably go on and beat Bahrain as well. I mean, if you're playing, Japan away is probably the only game in this group where you look at and we're probably not expecting 3 points, right? I think
you'd accept the loss.
Yeah, like you would accept that that's a game you're probably not expected to win. But every other fixture, including Japan at home, I would add, you should be expected to be in the fight, right? So definitely. That means that 6 points from this window is definitely achievable. I'd honestly be more disappointed if we drop points in the Saudi Arabia game, because I think at home, with all the new vibe around the team and the packed out stadium at Amy Park, you would hope they win that.
I just worry about the manager, like the bounce, getting in.
Yeah, Renner,
the history behind it, time and time again. When you get a new coach in, usually you get that response from Saudi. So especially, I want to see that first half, how the Saudis respond, and does that change Popper's approach, perhaps? But that's probably my only concern. Otherwise, I do think Australia, arguably, should be getting the 3 points at home.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that'll do for us today. Thanks to everyone tuning into the live stream. This will be up as a YouTube video as well.